Hello, everyone. Welcome to the third episode of Beyond the Toss podcast. Today episode we're calling it "Why China is the Way It Is." Now, the reason we are talking about it is anyone who is not sleeping under the rock probably know at this point the great power game that is going on. People are even claiming that within 2 years or 2 to 3 year time horizon, America and China may go under a conflict. So it's kind of relevant for our audience to understand China, and that's why we thought we will have a quick video on that. So with that, I'll let Astos talk about this in more details.
Thank you, Santosh, and welcome to today's episode. And the topic, as you guys can see, is why China is the way it is. And there is a very long history to this. And also, we promised in our first podcast, which was on Rome, that we'll be covering the Eastern civilizations. So here is China for you. All right. So going into the history, so this is how the Asia looked like around 200 BC. As you can see, my cursor pointing towards the China was consolidated under the Han Dynasty. And then towards the north, you can see these are the precursors to Huns and Mongols, the Khanate. And above that, we have tribes in the Siberia and the Russia part. In India, we have the Mauryan Empire. Uh, this is Tibet and again tribes in Southeast Asia. This part, as you can see, the Middle East, this was divided between the generals of Alexander. So you see the Seleucid Empire, the Greco-Bactrian Empire, Parthian Empire. So this was the known civilized world around 200 BC.
So looks like by 200 BC, Chinese Han Dynasty has already consolidated China, right? So
That's
how
right.
did it came to that?
That's a very good question, Santosh. So let's go to this slide. So as you can see, right, the history China has been inhabited for last 1.5 million years. Known history of humankind, or the ancestors of humans, and uh, Xia dynasty. They cultivated. Or they came up around the three big rivers, yeah, the Yellow River, the Yangtze Kiang River. So, like all the other civilizations, Indus, Egyptian, Mesopotamia, China was also built around three big rivers. And they, around 1500 BC, they started writing. I think they were one of the earliest to start writing. And the evolution of the Chinese language, the culture. Then around 800 BC, Zhou dynasty that had taken over, and there were close to 7 or 8 kingdoms, as you can see here, around that time, between the period of 1000 BC to 221 BC to be precise. So if you see here, so we had Shang dynasty from 1500 to 1027 BC, followed by Zhou dynasty from 1027 to 256 BC. And around the period of 450 to 221 BC, there were like continuous wars which were happening between 7 kingdoms in this part. And Qin dynasty in 221 BC, it consolidated, basically, it formed a central state. And China comes from Qin. It is written as Qin, but it is pronounced as Qin. It was a short, and a ruthless consolidation period of 14 or 15 years. And then coming to your question, Santosh, the Han dynasty, which was the golden period of Chinese culture, it took over in 202 BC. And this rule continued for close to 500 years.
Wow, that's a long period. So can you take into the timeline of what happened post Han conquest of China?
Right. So before I take you there, so Han Dynasty were the contemporaries of Roman Empire and the Mauryan Empire. I think we have already covered that in the first slide. So this was the Mauryan Empire, and then we had the Roman Empire here, which is not covered in the map. So coming back to your question, what happened after the Han Dynasty? So Han Dynasty ruled from around 202 to 250 AD, as you can see in the timelines, and this was the golden period, and they consolidated the concept of central state. They started major roadworks, waterworks, which is one of the few very important things which a central state can do, and it cannot be done by small tribes or small kingdoms around the world. We don't realize the importance of central states, but this is what a strong central state with big resources can do for its people. So yeah, and then, as you can see, there were the dynasty change like every 100, 200, or 300 years. This is said to be the Song dynasty period from 960 to 1279. This during this period, gunpowder was invented in China, and there were other technological, inventions, important inventions, which happened around that time.
So this is all about China state, right?
Right.
But can you also take us into how the state work with the people? What are the religion, custom, philosophy that Chinese?
Right. I think just one thing before I go to that point was the Mongols.
Mhm.
The dreaded Mongols. They basically took over China around 1279. The Great Kublai Khan, and so they ruled for a good 80 years, and then again the Han took back Ming Dynasty in 1368, and the last dynasty was the Qing Dynasty, which ruled from 1644 to 1911. So now, coming back to your question on the religion and the philosophy. So the Chinese had this concept of, again, I think I have missed 2 3 points. So the other good things which China gave to the world was bureaucracy. The Chinese were the first in the world to have a bureaucracy for which there were exams, and it was on merit. So they gave the system of bureaucracy to the world, and the way the Chinese rulers ruled was, they said to the people, right, they had this mandate of heaven. The God had given them this mandate to rule over the people, and they used that to exert their influence and political power. The other thing which is to be noticed is there was no balancing act like in Europe. We had the rise of church after Christianity was adopted by Roman Empire in 4th century AD. There was no balance and checks to the power of the Chinese emperors. So they ruled like God, which was a good thing, since it gave them a strong central state, but a weak culture also. And you would notice that throughout the history of Chinese civilization, there have been these peasant revolts on and off, and which also resulted in the 1911 revolution, where the communist and Chiang Kai-shek, they fought a 30-year civil war from 1911 to 1950, and eventually Mao Zedong came up as the eventual winner, and the Communist Party took over. Now, coming back to your question, sorry, I digressed. So there were three main religions, or the way of life, which were used by the empires as per their um suitability. So Confucius, he was around 450 BC, but the emperors used his philosophy of putting the family first. That's what Confucius told, that the duty to the family was of paramount importance. You know, and people should help to work for the state. That was Confucianism. Taoism, or Taoism, Laozi, as we call him, is the founder of this philosophy. He said that give up the worldly desires, and live in harmony with the nature. The concept of yin yang, it came from Taoism. And then we have this third gentleman, Han Feizi. This was around 200 BC. So emperors took this system also very seriously. So he said that human beings, they can only be governed by harsh laws and strict punishment. So this was the legalism system.
So you talked about people treating emperors as God, and I have heard a concept of mandate of heaven.
Yeah.
Can you describe how that worked, and how in today's day and age it is still true? Because China is largely a secular or irreligious society, because communists have mostly prohibited most of the major religions.
I think it's a very pertinent question, Santosh, and I think that's why we are doing this episode today. It's a very short episode today. So, the Zhou dynasty, right, which was around 1000 BC time. So, they started basically a kind of imperial era in China. And they introduced this mandate of heaven, which was a pivotal concept in Chinese government, where rulers were seen as divinely appointed and accountable to the gods. Okay. And as you can see, the definition of God in China, right, and versus the definition of God in the rest of the civilizations around the world, like Romans have their gods, right? And then the Greek culture, we see so many gods, the nature gods. And then in India, we have, again, we'll take up in another episode, we have close to 33 million gods. In Middle East, we have one God, right? But the way the Chinese emperor used God was that they appointed themselves as God, and ruled. And I think the very pertinent thing what you said was the way why China is the way it is, and the communists, they never identified God. They never believed in God.
Yeah.
And the current Chinese government also, right?
Mm.
Uh, mm, they also they retain the historical emphasis on a strong and centralized state, and the way they rule now, right? And so the Politburo basically is the god of the country, right? So Politburo is the god of the country, and they have retained that concept of strong central state, and keeping the society intentionally weak.
Mm.
And that's why China is the way it is. It has when you can see the technological advances they have made, in all walks of life, I would say, but they have still retained the concept of a very strong central government.
Interesting. Um, how will you frame CCP, right? Like it's a movement which rejected religion at its core, but people still kind of strongly believe in its mission. So
Yeah,
is it the same mandate of heaven concept that is going on, or like why that thing didn't change, even though
I
people
think
don't
so. I think that's what we are seeing today also, right? When you see, right, the way uh, they have they control the business magnates, Alibaba, the point in case, right, the founder of Alibaba. When he wanted to speak against the government, the way he was brought down, and the way the technology, the Googles, the Facebook's version, the WeChats in China, the way it is controlled, it works in a controlled way, right? So I think it's very obvious, they have continued that strong central grasp, and making sure that society is strong but not strong enough, to challenge them. And that's what the emperor wanted back in the days. Like nobody should challenge them.
Okay. So now that we are kind of coming to the conclusion of this episode, what
Right.
can we learn overall from China, and how does it kind of makes us understand where China will go from this point?
I think that's a very good question, and the result is to be seen. Um, I think I don't think it's the way they rule, the country or the system of government is going to change much. We have seen the 1989 Tiananmen Square tragedy, right? When the students tried to come up, and the way it was handled by the government. Even the Chinese search engines don't show that when somebody tries to search Tiananmen Square episode,
Yeah, including the LLMs.
including the LLMs. Yes, so I think it's gonna continue the way it is until a big geopolitical conflict happens, and then we will see how it goes. Because as human beings, we are getting exposed to new and new things. We still haven't learned how to live with entities which are more intelligent than us. It has never happened in the human history of last 3 million years, right? Known history of 3 million years. So with the machines rising, we will have to learn how to live with entities more intelligent than us. With that, I would like to, conclude.
I think there's just one remark which I want to add is from the timeline that you shared with the audience. Looks like there's some cycle to it, like a strong center which actually kind of disappears, and then another strong center emerges. So
Right.
maybe CCP is entering this era.
Probably.
We probably talk about all the good thing that's happening in China, but we barely get a mention of how catastrophic their demographic situation is,
Exactly.
or how reliant on the foreign kind of trade to feed their population. They don't have good soil, right? So
Exactly.
so there are problems galore, and if we have to learn a lesson from history, like if the strong center, which is CCP, if it shows some cracks, we may again see China kind of breaking apart and then maybe consolidating again. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, because and the good thing, I mean, a good or the bad thing about humans is we never learn from history, but history always repeats itself, or it rhymes in some way or the other.
Yeah.
So World War I, World War II, all the great wars in the past. So yeah,
All right.
we'll see.
I think that was fantastic, Astos. Really, really great insight into China, and I hope we'll cover more topics like this in our future episode.
Right.
So with that said, I think we'll say bye to our audience. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.